So, the rule of 7. Now, firstly, before I get into what exactly the rule of 7 is, for those of you who don't know, there is a lot of rules in bridge, rules being kind of guidelines, if you will. Rule's the wrong word, really. But the rule of and then number is very frequently used in bridge. Rule of 1, the rule of 11, the rule of 14, the rule of 7. There's rule of 15. There's lots of different, rule of 20. There's another one. There's loads and loads and loads of rule of and then put a number at the end. If you get the number mixed up and you start applying the rule of 15 when you should be applying the rule of 11, things will go drastically wrong. So you have to know which rule you are applying. Unfortunately, we don't have a name for them other than rule of number. So you have to know what the number refers to. The rule of 7 refers to ducking in no trumps. So we're talking specifically about not winning a trick which you could win in no trumps. Now, as I say, if you start applying this calculation but using a different number, things will go wrong. So you have to, the reason it's named the rule of 7 is because 7 is a critical number in the formula, if you will. So the idea of the rule of 7 is that when you're in a no-trump contract, I must stress that, strictly a no-trump contract, not winning the trick when you could win the trick is potentially an advantageous thing. Now, for this to be true, a few things need to be met. The first thing is, well, you need to be in no trumps, I suppose that's one of the things. The second thing is that you need to not have lots of tricks in that suit. So if you just look at this spade suit for an example, we are going to win the ace of spades in that spade suit, and that is the end of it. So we have one spade trick. So ducking only ever makes sense when you don't have lots of tricks in the suit. If we had ace, king, queen, and a little one, it probably wouldn't really make sense to duck, because we've got enough tricks. We've got plenty and plenty of stoppers. So when you have a lot of tricks in the suit, ducking doesn't really make sense. Especially if you had ace-king opposite queen XX, that would be really silly to duck, because we did have 3 tricks. By ducking, you turn it into 2. So ducking is only when you have a certain loser, if you will. Not loads of tricks coming out your ears. And the second time it gains an advantage is when the suit you are worried about, in this case spades, is breaking unevenly between the opponents. So the idea behind ducking in no trumps is that you try and run one opponent out of this worry suit. Typically duck when you are worried about the suit they've led. They normally lead their long suit because that's what good defenders will do. So normally you have, not always, but normally you have shortage in the suit that they have led, just based on kind of averages. So by ducking, what you're hoping is that the partner of the leader runs out of the suit, so only one opponent is threatening. So just take this hand for an example. If East were to lead spades against us North in some no-trump contract, let's say 3 no-trumps, it's odds on that East has long spades. So what we're hoping is that by East playing, let's say, 2 or 3 rounds of spades, West will then have run out of spades. And by ducking, you are exhausting one opponent of that danger suit. Once North's ace of spades is gone, once we relinquish the lead, it's potentially dangerous because that person, whoever gains lead, could run spade, 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 couldn't they, depending on how the spades are breaking. So the reason ducking is a sensible idea here is A, we are in no trumps, B, we have a suit that is shaky, one stopper only, and C, we have basically not enough cards to think that we don't have enough cards to think we are safe in this contract, because the spade suit is a threat, isn't it? And the fact that they have, I'm making the assumption, led spades, means that it's likely the person who led spades has longer spades. So let's say they do lead a spade. If they lead anything other than a spade, we have enough time to set our clubs up. I mean, the clubs might come in for 5 tricks anyway, depending on how they're behaving. But if they lead anything other than a spade, we are somewhat relaxed. And that's because we have control enough of all the other suits to mean that a spade lead is the only thing that actually hurts us. Hurts is probably the wrong word, but threatens our contract. So let's just make the assumption that East leads a spade against, let's say, 3 no trumps. Because if they don't, then we are in a comfortable contract. So a spade lead is the only thing that kind of worries us. Now, they've led the king because they've got top of a sequence. Not too worried about why they've led the king. But the key here is, if we take the ace of spades and we lose to the queen of clubs, then both opponents are guaranteed to have a spade left, unless the spades are, what would that make them, 7-1, which will be very unlikely, i.e. someone should have been bidding spades if that were the case. And if we do lose to the queen of clubs, after taking our ace of spades, the opponents will play spades at us. So they'll play spade, 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 depending on how the spades are behaving. We may or may not go off in our contract. So the idea of ducking, or the reason I'm getting an inkling or an instinct to duck, is because we have a one-stopper suit, a suit where we only have one winner, the ace, a definite winner, and no other stoppers, and we don't necessarily have our contract in the bag. So if we just count our top tricks, we've got 1 in spades, none in hearts, 2 in diamonds, that's 3, 2 in clubs, that's 5. Okay? Now I appreciate that's an extremely pessimistic view, because we will get some tricks out of hearts eventually, and we will get some more tricks out of clubs by length eventually. But if we just were to grab our current tricks, we only have 5 tricks off the top. So if we take our ace of spades and we lose the lead, let's say it's the ace of hearts or the queen of clubs, it's very, very likely that the opponents will then play a lot of spades, and our contract will be in jeopardy. So what we would like to do is make it so that only one opponent has spades left. Because we are missing 8 spades, they're either 4-4, which will be nice. If they are 4-4, they can't do that much damage because they're both playing spades every time they play a spade. The spade suit is going 2 down at a time. However, what's more likely than a 4-4 break is that East has longer spades than West. This isn't guaranteed. They could be 4 and 4, and if they are 4 and 4, we're not in that much of a problem area. I mean, we're not great, but we're not in that much of a problem area. Whereas if East has more spades than West, it could be, let's say, 5 and 3. That's not unreasonable. When you lose the lead, if East then manages to get the lead somehow and plays all their winning spades out, you will go off in your contract. So if the spades are unevenly distributed between the 2 hands, we need to try and make it that one opponent runs out. That's what the rule of 7 is looking to do. That's what ducking is about. Trying to make it so that one defender is exhausted of that spade suit. So if the spades are 5 and 3, if we were to duck spades 2 times and then win the 3rd spade, which is what's going to happen, they're going to play spade, spade, spade until we play our ace, West will then have ran out of spades. So then we could safely lose the lead to West, knowing they can't play spades. Now, knowing is a strange word because we don't know categorically, but it's likely, if anyone's got longer spades, it's quite likely to be East, given that they've led the spades. So by ducking a couple of times, we have kind of protected ourselves against this bad break, in a sense. In that, they have 5 spades, but potentially they might not be able to get the lead back to win those spades. Whereas if we take our ace of spades on the first trick, it's almost certain both opponents will have spades, and therefore will be able to get the lead to one another to be able to play their spade suit out. So essentially, ducking is about cutting communication between the 2 defenders. You're stopping them from being able to get to each other's hands easily. Yes, they could play a heart to the ace, depending on where the ace of hearts is. That is a way of them transporting the lead. But basically, without the ace of hearts, if you duck enough times, only one opponent will have spades left, unless they are 4 and 4. If they're 4 and 4, then you're not losing that many spades anyway, because they're breaking very nicely. So the idea behind the rule of 7, or the idea behind ducking as a whole, is that you cut communication between the 2 of them so that only one opponent has that bad suit left, whatever that bad suit is, in this case spades. Okay? Now what the rule of 7 does is it applies a mathematical formula to work out how many times you should duck. Because we noticed ducking twice with this spade suit and winning the 3rd round stopped a 5-3 break, potentially. A 4-4 break you can't stop because you can't duck enough times. But if it was 6-2, we would only need to duck once, wouldn't we? On a 6-2 break, it goes king, we let their king win, and then we win the 2nd round, they've just ran out because they only started with 2. I don't expect you to be psychic and know how the spades are distributed. They are 6-2 or 5-3 or 4-4, we don't really know. So what the rule of 7 does is it gives you a formula to work out what the most sensible number of ducks would be. Okay? So what you do to apply the rule of 7, hence the term 7, is that you add the cards up in the suit you're worried about, so the number of cards I should say, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You take dummy's cards and your cards, the number of cards, the quantity. So we've got 3 in hand, 2 in the dummy, that's 5. You subtract that number from 7. So that means 7 minus 5 is 2, so we should look to duck twice in this particular hand. The rule of 7 is telling us ducking twice is a sensible action. And the reason for that is if the spades are 5 and 3, after the 3rd round of spades, after ducking twice and winning our ace on the 3rd round, we will then have exhausted West of those spades. So theoretically, if West has the ace of hearts, you get rid of their ace of hearts and they cannot get the lead back to their partner's spades. Do you see that? If we just earmark the ace of hearts here, now I appreciate if the ace of hearts is with the long spade, you are in trouble. Because if they have the ace of hearts, it doesn't matter how many times you duck because they get back in with the ace of hearts and they play their spades. But if we pretend we know the ace of hearts is here and they have that in spades, by ducking twice, you have protected your contract. Because on the spades, it goes that, then the ace. Then you knock out their ace of hearts, and they haven't got any more spades to get back to their partner's winners. Do you see that? So it's all about cutting off the communication between the two and protecting yourselves from an uneven split in the suit that you are worried about. In this instance, we are worried about spades. So to apply the rule of 7, you have the numbers of cards in the suit you're worried about, and duck that many times. So 5 from 7 is 2, we should duck twice. Okay, all happy with that? Not that complicated mathematically. Why you have to do that I won't get into, because that is complicated mathematically. Just trust me, 7 is the magic number, okay? Because it is. Now if I change it ever so slightly to this, our hand has somewhat improved and somewhat got worse depending on how you see it. So we have now potentially extra club tricks, but we are more worried about spades. So it's gone up and down depending on how you're looking at it. Now in this instance, pretending we don't know the layout, how many times would we like to duck according to the rule of 7?
3.
3. 3 plus 1 is 4, 4 from 7 is 3. What's the problem with that? We physically can't duck 3 times. So if it happens that you apply the rule of 7 and you go, I want to duck 4 times, and you look and go, I can't. If you can't duck as many times as you are suggested to do so, you duck as many times as possible. So in this instance, ducking twice, no, I don't want to duck twice, I want to duck 3 times. But I can't, so I'll duck as many times as possible. Okay, you just do your best. That's all you can do. It's quite rare this happens. Normally you can duck sufficient number of times because ducking once or twice is the most common number of ducks. But it can happen ducking 3 or 4 times is recommended, and you can't do so simply through lack of length in that suit. So just do your best. In this instance I would duck twice and cross my fingers that it was the break I needed, which would be 6 and 3, and the ace of hearts being here. But that is somewhat fortuitous if that's the layout of cards, but you just do your best, okay? Because I could give you the rule of 7, not cover this, and then in a week's time you're playing in a hand and you go, alright, I want to duck twice, I can't, now what? You duck as many times as you possibly can, okay? In this instance twice, which really you want to duck 3 times, okay? Right, now the idea of the 7 being the magic number is that you are making it so that only one opponent has the danger suit left. Now the assumptions I'm making for that is that you have a certain stopper, at least one certain stopper. It's very important that it is a certain stopper, i.e. the ace basically, or a certain stopper because they've taken their ace and you now have the king left. The reason for that is if I slightly make this spade suit worse, and they lead a low spade, oops, don't know what's going on with that king, they lead a low spade, and it goes low spade, let's say the queen. Now the rule of 7 here, I'm going to correct this king because it's going to annoy me otherwise. The rule of 7 here suggests that we should be ducking 3 times, because we have 4 cards in the suit. There is a problem with ducking here. Where do you think the ace of spades is?
East.
It's almost certainly with east, unless West is doing something unusual. Third hand should play the ace if they have it, because they don't know where the king is. So, imagining this is the declarer hand. So we suspect east has the ace of spades. So if we play a low spade, which is what the rule of 7 would suggest, isn't it? A spade then comes back. What card are you playing then? You can't win. That's why no one's answering. Because if you play the king, it gets swallowed by the ace, and then suddenly they play all their spades. And if you don't play the king, they don't play their ace. The problem we have here is that the king was not a definite trick, was it? The king is never a definite trick unless the ace has appeared before it. So therefore, what card should we play in the queen of spades?
King.
The king of spades. Not following the rule of 7. The reason you don't follow the rule of 7 here is because the king is a trick now only. If you don't play the king of spades right now, you will never make that king because the ace of spades is on top of you. Do you see that? If, however, it had gone low spade to the ace, we obviously play small on that one. When the spade comes back, you can afford to duck because the king is a certain trick now. Do you see the difference? Very important. Because if you misapply the rule of 7, you might not make a trick at all, depending on how you do in that hand. Okay? So the king is somewhat of a precarious stopper, and if they don't take their ace, the king might only be a trick right then and there. So be aware of it. Similarly, things can happen when you've got the queen x opposite ace to 3 and you duck from the ace, you might only make the queen now and only now. So really the rule of 7 only applies when you have a certain stopper and a certain loser. Basically ace with a few babies or ace-king with a few small ones. Certain stoppers, not precarious stoppers, because precarious stoppers you've got to take whilst you can. Now in this hand, if it was a spade to the queen, I am feeling somewhat sick about the contract. Yes, I don't like the 3 no trumps I'm in, because they have led the worst thing for me. Now we cannot afford to lose the lead at all. So basically I need the clubs to come in. Simple as that. You need the clubs to come in. You need queen singleton clubs or the clubs 2-2, essentially. So you have to take the king, because if you don't take the king, you will never take the king, and in fact you are now off if you don't take the king of spades, because they'll just rattle all their spades off. And you play on the clubs. Don't play on the hearts, because when they win the ace of hearts, they're going to play spades. Okay? So you only ever apply the rule of 7, basically, when you have a definite stopper. That can be the king when it's established by their ace, or it could be the ace without any others with it. Okay? And the rule of 7, the number 7, tells you how many times is sensible to duck to try and cut the communication between the two of them. Alright? Let's say we're in 1 no trump. That's a reasonable contract. Yeah, sure. North's in 1 no trump. And now let's try 2 different suits they lead here. Firstly, let's start them with the queen of diamonds. Or a low diamond, either, don't really mind. Queen suggests they've got queen jack 10 or queen jack 9, something like that. So here, you could make the argument, well, I have the ace and the king, so I'm not worried. We're not massively worried about diamonds, but we are somewhat worried about diamonds. So just because you have the ace and the king does not mean the rule of 7 doesn't necessarily apply, because the opponents do have diamond tricks eventually, don't they? Slow diamond tricks, if you will. So what you would like to do is cut them off from one another, being able to play diamonds, essentially. The suit we're most likely going to play on is clubs. We might play on hearts, depending on what we think. But essentially, we should still apply the rule of 7 because we have 2 definite stoppers and 1 definite loser. There's no precariousness about our diamonds. We have the ace and the king, and that's it. So here, the rule of 7 does still apply. Even though we have the ace and the king, it still applies. Obviously, ducking twice would be bad, though, because if we duck twice, our ace and king will be played in the same trick. So if you like, the rule of 7 is a good guideline, but think before you actually do it, because sometimes the rule of 7 will tell you to duck too many times and suddenly your tricks are actually getting less rather than more. So according to the rule of 7, we would like to duck diamonds how many times? Once. We have 6. 6 from 7 is 1. So therefore we would like to duck diamonds once. I suspect if I'd given a lot of you this hand without saying anything, most of you wouldn't duck the diamonds because you have the ace and the king. And that is, if you like, a pseudo-safe feeling. You feel protected because you have the ace and the king. Oh, well, if I lose the lead, I'm still okay. That's true, but if you lose the lead twice, which is quite likely in this hand, you are not okay in diamonds. So you're protecting yourself with a long-term plan. The long-term plan is to run one of them out of diamonds so that only one opponent is dangerous. Let's imagine the diamonds are 5 and 2, which is possible, isn't it? If we duck the diamonds once, on the second round of diamonds, West has suddenly run out, and only East is the one who can knock out your last diamond stopper, and then has to get back in to play their diamonds themselves. So taking the ace or king here, whilst I understand the instinct to do so, would be actually lazy. We're never going to take 13 tricks, so losing a diamond trick is not the end of the world, but cutting them off from one another is potentially a gain for us in the long run. So it's a long-term strategy. So the rule of 7 says duck, so we should do so. Now when they continue the diamonds, ducking again would be silly, wouldn't it? We have the ace-king opposite, well, the ace small opposite king small. If we duck in both hands, we've got the ace and king in the same trick. So logic supersedes anything that you might think, but obviously the rule of 7 has told us to duck once anyway, so that's fine. So here, we want to win. I want to win in north so I can take some club finesses, but it doesn't matter really, but it is better to win in north. So by doing so now, the theory is, I'm going to say the diamonds are 5-2, because if they're 4-3, I'm not particularly frightened. Now when I play a club to the, let's say the 10, and that loses to the jack, because finesses never work, the West now might not have any more diamonds, so they have to switch. They might switch to spades through our ace-queen, they might switch to hearts, which will be nice for us, setting up our heart tricks. They almost certainly won't play clubs, because that's the suit we've played. But essentially, diamonds is the best thing for the defence, isn't it? They play a diamond, that gets rid of our king, which is a certain trick, and then whoever gets in has winning diamonds. With me? Whereas by ducking on the first round, West has suddenly ran out of diamonds. So the rule of 7 still applies even if you have the ace and the king. Even if you have 2 certain stoppers, it still applies. Obviously, logic superseding that, if you duck and it costs you a trick, that's not good. So you need to think carefully about ducking when you have 2 tricks, because it's occasionally you'll make them fall together. But in this instance, by ducking once and winning the second round of diamonds, when we took this club finesse, which is our most likely play, when West gets in, they then can't lead any more diamonds and are forced into switching. If they switch to a heart, let's say you play a big one, they win the king, they're now likely to force out that king of diamonds. But by ducking on the original trick, you've made West do something different, which has to benefit you in some way, shape or form. With me? So 2 stoppers, still apply the rule of 7. If I was to give us ace, queen, king, we now have 3 tricks from our 3 diamond cards. So ducking once will be silly, wouldn't it? Do you see? Do you see how the rule of 7 is good, but you've got to think carefully when applying it. It's not just a case of a carte blanche, apply the rule of 7. Because in this instance, ace, queen, king means that we're going to take 3 diamond tricks. If we duck in both hands, we've turned 3 into 2. That is not good bridge. Alright? So think carefully when you are about to duck, do I actually have a certain loser in this suit? The answer is no. The answer is no, don't duck, because you've got tricks. So in this instance, I would not duck with the ace, king, queen. Do you see the difference? It's very important. If you've got certain tricks, you don't need to duck. If you've got a definite loser, then consider ducking. Okay? Right, now if I just go back, kind of rub these hands, and then we play basically the same hand but on a different lead. Okay, same hand, but now we're on a spade lead. If they lead a heart or a club, they are playing our length suits, which is good for us. So I'm imagining they're not going to help me. If they lead a heart, that's good, because you just keep playing hearts or clubs until you win. If they lead a club, that's good, because they're setting your length clubs up, although they probably are breaking badly now. So spades and diamonds are their length suits, so they probably are most likely leading a diamond or a spade. Now if they lead a spade, this one I suspect would get all of you, maybe, who knows. A spade goes to the king. What are you playing? Okay, if I wasn't stood at the front and you were playing on a Monday afternoon, what card would you play? You would play the ace, wouldn't you? Let's be honest, come on, let's be honest with each other. We'd play the ace. Right. That's because aces beat kings. Aces are good at killing kings, and in fact that's the reason you have them in your hand, if you are dealt them. However, the queen is now a definite winner, because the king has just appeared, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we now have 2 definite stoppers. Do you agree with me? Mm-hmm. We have 2 tricks in the spade suit because the king has just appeared. Mm-hmm. So we have 2 definite stoppers. Do we have a definite loser in spades? Yes, this baby one. If we play the ace, we will lose one eventually, won't we? So we have 2 definite stoppers and a definite loser. So this is feeling like a rule of 7, is it not? Yeah? So what does the rule of 7 say? How many times should we be ducking? Once. So should we play the ace?
No.
No, you should play a small card, which is very, very difficult to get your head around, isn't it? The amount of times it's right to not play your ace on the opponent's king is very slim, probably in the single percentile. But if we follow the rule of 7, we are hoping that the spades are 5-2, so by ducking this king, when they play their second spade, you win your ace or queen. It's better to win the ace for deceiving the opponent's interest. But when you win your ace on the second trick, it's possible West has run out of spades now. Do you see that? We are never going to get 3 tricks from this spade suit. Never. We are only ever going to make 2, so it does not cost us to duck. Do you see? If it was ace, queen, jack, ducking would be silly, wouldn't it? Because we now have 3 tricks in the spade suit. Do you see? It's very important that you get the kind of the logic is first and foremost, and if we do have a definite loser, that's when to start thinking about ducking. Alright? So with this particular spade suit, if any of you would have played the small card as an instinct, well done, because that's the correct card, but I suspect most of us would have played the ace, because aces on kings is one of the best feelings in bridge. It's not correct in this instance, because the rule 7 says so. We have a definite loser, so lose it now. They then continue spade. I mean, it might be they have singleton king of spades. If they have singleton king of spades, that is exceptionally good for us, because now they cannot play spades again. So they have to switch. They're probably going to switch to diamonds based on our hand, but we have protected ourselves from that spade suit. You with me? Let's say they don't have singleton king of spades, so they play the king. They play a little one, you play your ace. It now might be that West has no more spades. Because you have ducked that one round, a 5-2 break is far more likely than a 6-1 break. You with me? So, rule of 7 only applies when you have a definite loser in the suit and at least one definite stopper in the suit. And you do so to try and cut them off from one another. You do not apply the rule of 7 when A, you have a lot of tricks in the suit, as many tricks as cards, like ace, king, queen, with only 3 in each hand, or something similar. And you don't apply the rule of 7 when your stopper is not definite, when you have to take the king now because it is your only stopper. Okay? You need to think carefully and logically before applying the rule of 7 because it isn't a be-all and end-all of ducking in no trumps. You need to think carefully about when you are ducking and why you are ducking, because there are sometimes ducking is wrong even though it feels right. You need to think carefully. Like in this example, playing the ace feels right, but ducking is the right thing to do. So your instinct isn't always correct. That doesn't mean you're a bad bridge player, it just means things lead you down the wrong avenue, if you will. If we have 13 tricks between the two hands, why are you ducking? So again, the logic beats everything. You know, logic, obviously, thinking about that suit in its own is more important than applying these rules. But when it does apply that you have a definite loser and only 1 or 2 definite stoppers, the rule of 7 is a good idea. Okay? The most common time, by far, is when you have the ace and only the ace. Okay? Because the ace and only the ace is very dodgy when they've led that suit, because your ace is gone pretty quickly and then you've got problems. Okay? That's the most common scenario where rule of 7 applies. But there are other niche scenarios like this one in the spades. Okay? Right, one more thing I just want to point out about the rule of 7, where I've seen it go wrong sometimes. It can be somewhat deceptive if you misapply it, just like any rule, I suppose. Okay, another really exciting flat hand. He starts off with a diamond lead, let's say a small diamond. We don't know how the diamonds are breaking because they've not led the 2, let's say they've led the 5. So we play a small diamond from dummy, I don't care which one. West plays the king. So the king of diamonds is ducked, let's say, which is the wrong play, which I'll explain why in a minute, because the rule of 7 says that's the right play, doesn't it? 3 plus 3 is 6. 6 away from 7 means 1. So we should, according to the rule of 7, be ducking once. What the rule of 7 is ignoring is the jack 10 of diamonds. Ace, little, little, the rule of 7 definitely applies. But ace, jack 10 is slightly different. So when we play the 10 of diamonds underneath their king, and they play a diamond back, what card are you playing? Well, let's put it this way. If we play the ace, East isn't playing their queen, are they? And if we play the jack, East is playing their queen. So how many tricks are you going to make from this diamond suit? 1, the ace. Well, that's not very good, because that's all you were going to make. Now, if you only had the ace, fair enough. However, if we had played our ace on their king, as discussed previously, the jack 10 is our guaranteed trick. Once the queen's gone, which the jack or 10 will get rid of, the other one will be a winner, won't it? So again, if you have potential for extra tricks, the rule of 7 does not apply. It's only when you have a certain winner and a certain loser, and there is no other movement. There's no potential for extras here, there, or everywhere. Okay? If you are unsure and you think you might glean an extra trick by taking the trick now, do so. If you're unsure. So the reason the rule of 7 doesn't apply here is simply those 2 diamond intermediates become a trick. Okay? Again, logic beats the rule. Alright?